So I think I'll start. Oh, Victoria, great. Hello, how very nice to see you. So what made you want to join this session?
Because we do some work with the Youth Justice Service in Nottingham, so I thought it'd be quite interesting to sort of, they're not very successful, just to sort of see if there's anything that we could do to change that success.
Okay, good, right. So tell me which service it is specifically that you work with.
We work with the Youth Justice Service in Nottingham. So we work with the city and Remedy work with the county.
Right, okay. So do you work with youth offending services?
Yeah, youth offending service, yeah.
Right.
Sorry,
okay.
yeah.
Good. Right, okay, good. That helps me know how to pitch this. So that's very good. And if anybody else wants to come and join me on screen, you're welcome, because there's so few of us and I think we can take up to 9 people. So you're welcome to all join me on screen. I will introduce myself I'm just going to mute your mic, Victoria, just for a second.
Yeah, of course, yeah, do.
Anyway, yes, if anybody else wants to join, that would be lovely. Go into the moderation panel and just ask me about what happens is your name or initials come up and then I click to allow you to be able to join me. It's very strange sitting here all on my own, so I'm extremely grateful to Victoria to coming to join me. Otherwise, I feel, frankly, that I'm talking into a void. So for those of you who don't know me and know our work, I'm a restorative practice and restorative justice facilitator, trainer and consultant, and we work all over the place. So to give you an idea of the pieces of work that we've done that are most appropriate for this setting, we've got the Howard League Award for Restorative Approaches, and that was for a piece of work that we did nationally, bringing the police together with young offenders. And in restorative circles to look at the impact of stop and search and to look at building relationships between the police and young people. And I think that what this session is about is looking at how we can work restoratively in a far broader way than just restorative justice to bring around change and to support and help young people going through the system. So we got the Howard League Award for that piece of work between the police and young people. And then and I've done another big piece of work around young people and their use of social media and how we can support them restoratively, and that was in schools. And then I went to the United Nations to speak about that. And then the other thing that I think is quite interesting for you guys is a year's work that we did in Colombia, working with 50 ex-young offenders and looking at how they could be supported to be reintegrated back into their community through a number of approaches, which was all underpinned by a restorative philosophy. So what do I mean by that? What do I mean by a restorative philosophy? There are 5 ways that we work when we work restoratively. Let me just put a PowerPoint up so you can have a look. I'm not going to do a PowerPoint, so don't worry, but I am going to show you a couple of slides. When we, can everybody see that? Yep, great. So when we work restoratively, we follow these 5 principles, which are fair process. So making sure that everything that happens is fair, giving everybody a voice within a no blame, no shame culture, encouraging accountability, and working with people rather than doing things to or for them, rather than having power over them or stroking them too much, and using the restorative questions in everything that we do. And the restorative questions basically are what make our work restorative. So what's the difference between a restorative approach? Now, normally I do this interactively, but other than Victoria, she's the only friend I've got on the screen. So what do I mean by that? So in the old system, if something went wrong, so say you're working with a bunch of young people and you're working, let's say, in a pupil referral unit, okay? And let's say the door gets kicked in. A door gets kicked in. So what's happened? What's happened is a door has got kicked in. What's the next question that usually gets asked in the traditional system? What's happened? The door's got kicked in. What's the next question? Someone put in the chat what they think the next question would be after what's happened. Victoria, what do you think? Who did
Why
it? Who did it, Joanne? Spot on. Spot on, Joanne. Who did it? That is exactly where people go. What's happened? Who did it? I.e., who's to blame? Whose fault is it? Which naturally leads to what happens, which is how are we going to punish them? How are we going to sanction them? And Joanne, thank you for that, because that is exactly what the traditional system does. What's happened? Who's to blame? What are we going to do to punish them? And that's not how we work restoratively. So fundamentally, everything we do follows a different process. And the different process goes like this. What's happened? Because we need to look at what's happened. And then we look at the impact. And then we look at, so how do we need to move on? So we move from what happened, who did it, how do we sanction them, to what happened, how is it impacting on everyone, and what do we need to do next? And I'm going to give you a quick story about why this makes a difference. Are you all still with me? Good. So in Colombia, David, who was one of the key workers, he was in his first week of working with these 50 young people who were hardcore, right? They're hardcore. They've most of them been convicted for homicide, because in Colombia you get 3 years for homicide if you're under 18 and 60 if you're over 18. So the gangs recruit the young people to commit the murders because their parents get paid. Frankly, that's what happens. So we're working with these quite hardcore young people who've been through very, very traumatic experiences as a result of their choices. And David gets home after about night 3 and picks up his phone, and there's some quite threatening and abusive messages from one of the young people. So he's got a number of choices. So the next day he goes in to work and he says, I want to call a restorative circle, right? And sits them all down and he goes, last night I received some really quite threatening and intimidating messages on my phone. And the whole room does this. Why do they do this? What are they expecting? Anybody want to write in the chat what they're expecting? They've all gone. Exactly. What they're expecting is him to go, so which one of you did it? Which one of you did it? And he didn't. What he said is, and he's telling me this story because he wants me to kind of support the way he did it, or he wants to get some feedback. So he says to me, so I said to them, you know, I'd just like to tell you how that was for me when I received those messages. I was quite scared, actually, and quite intimidated. And I also realized I'd got off on the wrong foot with some of you. So I'd like to have a chat with you about how we can build relationship and make relationship better. So he goes around the circle and he gets to one lad and he goes, this lad goes, it was me, David, I sent the text and I'd like to apologize because I don't think, having heard you, I don't think that was appropriate. And then he talks a little bit more. So you get to the end of the circle and what's happened? You've found out who did it. You've had an apology. You've built relationship. You've built trust. You've got them all to hear each other by simply following a different method, by simply following a method that goes, what's happened, what's the impact, and what next? And actually, that's transformative. So what are we doing in youth offending institutions to apply these principles and this way of working in a new way? Because youth offending institutions aren't working. And, you know, if you have a look at what's going on, I've got some stats in front of me. 80% of young people who get involved in crime have communication issues. That's what came out this year from the Youth Justice Board. The Farmer Report said that the golden thread to reduce reoffending is their relationships with their families. That's the golden thread to reduce reoffending. The rehab culture, which is being introduced in youth offending institutions, which has got a lot of restorative principles in it, is showing that actually this is the way forward, rehabilitative culture. And the other thing is if you ask victims what it is they want from the people who perpetrate crimes, they don't say, the majority of them, they want them punished. What they say is they want them to not do it again. Now that's very different. They want people to not do it again. I'm so grateful to you being there, Victoria. Just having your nods makes me feel like I'm not wasting my time. So we had to think about this, and we had to think about this in COVID, because I'm sitting in my office, not able to go anywhere, not able to do anything. And I'm thinking, what's the problem in prisons? What's the problem we've got? Is that we've got men sitting in wings who can't access programs, who have to be deemed to be appropriate to go on programs. And they only get access to programs within X amount of time of their release, and there aren't enough spaces. This is not okay. So what we've done is we've devised a program which we've taken onto the wing, which is everybody can participate in. Frankly, this should be being done in youth offending services everywhere, if I'm going to be honest. So we've devised a program where the resident on the wing does not go off to programs when his time's up and he fits the criteria. We go onto the wing and everybody can do it. Someone asked me a question in the prison where we're doing it, which is ISIS, which is next door to Thameside. And it would be lovely to come and see you guys in Thameside again. And someone asked me a question, which was, what happens if someone does something wrong? You know, if somebody does something wrong on the wing, do they get kicked off the program? And I'm like, no, of course they don't get kicked off the program. They need the program even more. The program is called Reset. Let me show you the logo. So the program is called Reset, which stands for Relational Skills Training. And the tagline is, it starts with me, because frankly, that's where it starts. And it's a 6-week program. It's a 6-week program that builds communication skills, and it's delivered by the key worker officers. So what it's doing is building relationships between the key worker officers, which is the officers on the landings, and the guys in the cells, in their pads. So immediately you're creating a better relationship between the wing officers and the men in the wing. And it's 6 weeks long. It's made up of films, short 6-minute films, and a workbook, and key worker sessions once a week. And we go in once a week and host circles. And where the men who are participating, it's currently men, where the men who are participating get the opportunity to talk about their learning in a small group. And my, H and PPS, I hope, and I think they're interested, want to roll this out everywhere. And my thinking is, well, why wouldn't you? It's just common sense. Actually, what I think is the best place where this could go, which is interesting what you were saying, Victoria, I think the best place this could go is into youth offending services. Because actually, if you think about it, prison officers, when they're trained, they get a 12-week training. And, what's the need? What's the need for this? So I've talked about how programs don't work for everybody. You've got men who are bored out of their brains on the wings, and they've got nothing to do. They're not sometimes deemed suitable, and they've all got these problems with communication. So I've lost where I was going, but my feeling about bringing it into youth offending is a lot of the problems that we've got in prisons are things like we can't actually get the bloody films to the men in the wings. So what we're doing is we're putting them on DVDs because they've all got PlayStations. All of those problems could be resolved in youth offending services because it's really easy for the youth offending officers to play the films. They can just have them on their laptops. So let me tell you how the course works. It's got this workbook. It's got films. Now, the interesting thing for you guys is the films are all made by ex-residents. So I'm in one or two of them, but they can't really identify with me, let's be honest. But they can identify with guys who've been convicted of manslaughter or been inside for 20 years and have got a lot of lived experience, and talk to them about how learning these skills has turned their life around. So they're made by men with lived experience. And at the end of the 6 weeks, they are given an invitation to have a restorative. We don't even call it restorative, we call it supported, to have a supported conversation with a family member. So at the end of it, they complete the course. We talk about triggers, we talk about shame, we talk about using the restorative questions to express themselves. We talk about having adult-to-adult communication. We talk about a whole host of techniques, practical, sensible, common sense, straightforward, easy to use techniques that anybody could pick up and use tomorrow. And then at the end of it, they're invited to have a one-to-one conversation with a loved one. Doesn't have to be a family member, somebody who matters to them, to help build relationship before they leave jail. And I think that there's a lot of possibilities for this program in youth offending services or pupil referral units or a whole bunch of places where, oh, I know what I was going to say. Prison officer training. Okay, so prison officer training in this country is 12 weeks long. And you get 1 week on control and restraint training, okay? A week on control and restraint training. How much training do you think you get on relational skills? None. Exactly that. None. So actually, one of the things Mark says, I should have shown the film with Mark actually, who was on an IPP sentence and is now 40 and has spent an awful lot of his life in jail. One of the things Mark says in the films was that when he went to a rehab jail, it was the first time someone had said to him, "What's going on with you? Where are you at?" And that's because the people in that jail had been trained in relational skills training. And genuinely, that turned him around. Just someone being interested, being curious, and giving him some skills and tips to be able to navigate through his life better was all he needed in order to be able to learn to pick up a different way of doing things. So that's what we're doing in the jail. And let me just show you some other things. So how we've done it is we have created posters for the men. So posters for them to have on the wing. We have then created workbooks. Let me just show you page 1 of the workbook. The workbooks are really colourful, and let me just find it here. So they feel valued, they're really simple, they've got visuals in them, they are very clear, and they really support them to understand the messages that are in the films. So these are the kind of things that we do in the workbooks. That's module 1 in the workbook. We, as I said, the films are all made by ex-residents. We have, and we have got training for the officers, so the officers know how to run the sessions. And actually what we discovered is that when we went into the prison, as I said, actually, we had quite a bit of resistance from the officers. We had a bit of this going on, a bit of, don't tell me how to do my job. Fair enough. But Mark can tell you how to do your job, because Mark's been in this exact place. And Jacob can tell you how to do your job, and Jacob can tell you what works for him and what didn't work for him. So, and so what we did was we didn't go in and just train people straight off. What we did is we went in and had conversations. And it's, yes, that's what victims say about RJ, that they don't want them to do it again. Exactly that. It's not, we don't want them to be punished. We want them to be punished. It's we don't want them to do it again. So ultimately, if our goal is to stop people doing it again, we need to be working with a system that is going to prevent people doing this again. And the way to do that is to work through a series of questions that encourage people to look at the impact and look at why they wouldn't do it again. It's such common sense. I can't understand how people can think that punishing people will make people stop wanting to do it again. What it does is trigger them and triggers their shame. And as those of you who've learned the compass of shame know, when people get triggered by shame, they're more likely to do it again. They're more likely to. It's not the reverse. So I'm really excited about this project. I think it's a really lovely piece of work, and I think it's got enormous potential. And I think the combination of using films, workbooks, one-to-one and group circles is a very lovely blend. And I think the great thing about the films is, A, they're being delivered by people who are reachable. B, they're in bite-sized chunks. They're only 6 minutes long. And C, it means that the program can't get lost. There's something called, I don't know if any of you guys have worked in prisons, but there's something called 5-minute interventions in prison. And 5-minute interventions were a beautifully designed thing. But the problem is that as they've been rolled out across the whole of HMPPS, they've had a bit of drift. They've kind of lost the essence of their magic. But whereas this course, because there's a lot of it being done by film, it can't lose its integrity. So I think that that's one of the things that's really beautiful about it. But I would love to see it being rolled out in youth offending services, and for those of you who work with young people, to support you in the toolkits that you've got to, you know, give people some of these very basic skills. Because my experience of working with residents in prison around the compass of shame, and if none of you know the compass of shame, I'm happy to go through it, but my experience of working with them about how shame works in our systems and what it does to us is the minute we show it to young people, they say, why hasn't anybody shown us this before? Why has no one talked to us about this? This is so important. So I don't really want to talk so much more. What I would like to know is whether what I've talked to you about has given you any food for thought or made you interested and curious in knowing more? And if so, how I can help? Victoria.
Yeah, straight away I got the mic on. I just wondered, is this something that you would be taking into sort of probation into the community? Because I think it would be, my background's, that, and I think it would work really well because, as you say, I'm not surprised by the figures of the 80% of young people having communication issues, because I know, having worked with offenders in the past in sort of the community, that is definitely a barrier. And like you say, it's about blame, it's about punishment, and ultimately punishment doesn't work. It works to sort of appease the public, to show, to demonstrate, look, this is what happens, but it doesn't stop offending, it doesn't address the problem. And I just wondered whether, because I think that they're going to be reducing when the changes come about in June, and they integrate the probation CRCs back together, that less people will be going to prison and more people will be in the community.
Yes.
And I wonder if this is something you'd be rolling out.
Well, my aim is, I'm talking to a lot of people at HMPPS, and and it would be great to talk to some of the seniors and people like Paul and stuff at Catch. My aim is that we make this program available to as many people who want it, because ultimately it doesn't require us. All it requires is people, we've got a 1-page sheet on how to deliver the one-to-one session. And you guys who are working with young people have all got the skills to hold group circles. So it doesn't need specific restorative skills to be able to support this work. I'd love it if it got rolled out everywhere. It's whether there's an appetite for it and an uptake for it.
It sounds really interesting, really interesting.
Good. What bit about it interests you most?
I think, like I say, I think what it is the fact that it's looking at, because I think that, when you've worked somewhere and you can sort of see where things are going wrong, and like I say, it's all about shaming people and about, everything being very punitive. And this is about sitting someone down and talking about just trying to make things better. And I think that it lets people be, I can't think of the word, it lets people do it for themselves rather than being forced to do it. They're making a choice.
Exactly. And the thing is, I'm going to respond to Jane's question, because I think that's a really important question. Jane's question is, how much does shame contribute to people not wanting to engage within a restorative intervention? So when we deliver our training, this training on restorative, we are absolutely not encouraging people to go towards a restorative conversation. That's not the aim of it. The aim of it is to build skills in communication. So one of the things we do, for example, Jane and Victoria, is we turn the restorative questions into how can you express yourself. So if the restorative questions are what happened, what's the impact, what next? For yourself, it's saying things like, when I saw that picture on Instagram, that's what happened. I felt really angry because I thought we'd agreed that we weren't going to post pictures without showing each other. And what I'd like is for you to take it down. So what we do is we show people how they can use this process to better communicate and express their own needs. In answer to Jane's question, how much do I think shame gets in the way of people participating in restorative justice? Okay, so for those of you who don't know the compass of shame, what it is that basically this very clever chap called Nathanson, I'm getting there, Jane, don't worry, I'm getting there. This very clever chap called Nathanson said, when we get triggered, when our shame gets triggered. By the way, just before we go in to talking about shame, anybody like to tell me what they think is the difference between guilt and shame? Anybody like to put into the chat what they think the difference between guilt and shame is? Because there's a very big difference. And I think this is really important. Okay, so here's the thing that I did that wasn't great. That's the thing I did that wasn't great. Guilt is where I can look at that thing and feel bad about it because I don't think it was great, but I still hold myself in positive regard. I'm okay, but that wasn't okay. Shame is when we don't feel okay. It's nothing to do with the thing, it's us. We're bad people. And shame is never helpful. Shame is never helpful. So what Nathanson said about shame is when our shame gets triggered, when something happens that triggers our shame, we respond unhealthily in 4 ways. The first way is that we attack other people. So we go, it wasn't me, it was them. So we pass the buck, or we go into denial, or we get defensive. We immediately get defensive. We attack others. The second way that we respond to shame is we attack ourselves. And that's, in my case, when I go to bed and I go, oh, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I did that. I'm so stupid. Oh, I'm such an idiot. So we attack ourselves. And then the last 2 ways are avoid and withdraw. So it's, I'll put a slide up so you can see it in a sec, but it's attack others, attack self, avoid and withdraw. Avoid is when your kid says, I don't want to go to school because I've got a tummy ache. And they might have a tummy ache, or they might have got embarrassed yesterday, which triggered their shame, which means they want to hide from other people. So it's hiding from other people. And the last one is, I get avoid and withdraw mixed up, is hide from ourselves. And that's very different to attack self. Hide from ourselves is where we resort to drink and drugs and risky behaviors because we don't want to, you know, when that feeling comes in, we go, blah, 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 I'm not listening, blah, 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 not listening. And that's hide from self. So let me just show you on the slideshow the compass so you can have a look at it. Okay. So here's the compass. Attack others. Oh, I've got them the wrong way around. I always do. Attack others. Get defensive. Attack self. Putting yourself down. Masochism. Withdraw. Hide from others. And avoid. Hide from ourselves. Now, the really interesting thing is what is the healthy way beyond shame? Those are the unhealthy ways beyond shame. What are the healthy ways beyond shame? Because there's no point knowing all of that unless you know the way out of it, right? So what Nathanson said is, in order to be able to move beyond shame healthily, we have to look at what's happening. We have to look at the impact. And we have to work out what to do next and show remorse if necessary, which is the restorative questions. So in answer to Jane's question, if you work restoratively, you cannot shame people. And that's why it's that's why I can do homicide cases and rape cases and sexual harm cases and domestic abuse cases and child sexual harm cases, because I know it's a non-shaming process. And I know that people who've been in these situations where their shame might have been triggered, the restorative process will move them beyond shame. And can you see now, when you show this to young offenders, for example, you show them this compass and you show them the way beyond it, it's completely liberating because they can take charge of it themselves. They can get their power back by saying, when I get triggered, I can choose a different response. When I get triggered, I can choose a different response. There is a space in between where I can choose a different way of doing things. And that's basically our work. Our work is about showing people where that space lies. So, Jane, I think the work of people who work restoratively, the reason it works so successfully is because it doesn't trigger shame. But what we need to be doing to give people confidence, trust, and safety is get them sat with skilled and trained restorative facilitators who can support them and make them feel safe and show them that it's a non-shaming experience. The only way is to do it. That's the only way. And I think people are anxious about it because it's brave and scary and difficult. And the problem is we all avoid the scary, difficult and brave conversations because we don't know how to navigate them. And that's what the course teaches them. The course teaches them how to navigate the scary, scary conversations that we're all not terribly skilled at having. And then we start acting them out in really unhealthy ways. You know, Brene Brown, my favorite writer, she calls shame our sense of not good enough. That's such a good description. I'm not good enough. You know, my daughter rang me up the other day and she'd got a job in a wine bar. This is before lockdown. And she's very dyspraxic and she'd realised she couldn't open bottles of wine. She rang me up and she's going, I'm so stupid. Why did I do it? Why did I do it? Why did I get a job in a wine bar? Attack self. I'm not going into work this evening. This is too embarrassing. This is too embarrassing. Withdrawal. What are you doing now? I'm drinking a glass of wine. Avoid. You know, she's going round and round the compass. We all do it. So I asked her the restorative questions. And by the end of it, she had come up with 5 examples of how she could get herself beyond that situation. And within a month, become the most loved person in the wine bar. This applies to all of us. It applies to all of us, not just the people we're working with who are struggling. So I think there's something really important about this work because it's empowering and it gives people choice and the opportunity to take their power back. We've got 7 minutes. Has anybody got any questions? I'll be quiet and wait. And Jane, does that answer your question? I'm waiting for something to come up in the chat. Ah, here we go. Lovely. Jane's joined us as well as Victoria.
Hello.
Hey, hello, gorgeous.
How are things? Good to see you.
Lovely to see you too. What a treat.
Yes, absolutely. That covered that very well. And I think it does actually impact every element of our lives, whether you've done it something wrong or not.
Of course it does.
It creeps in, doesn't it?
Of course it does. No one knows what other people's shame triggers are. No one knows. So it doesn't need to be whether you've actually done something wrong. It can just be, it's that sense of not good enough. Nobody knows what triggers somebody else's sense of not good enough or embarrassment. That's what the guys in jail call it. They call it embarrassment. I call it not good enough. You know, professionally, it's shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
Do you think that perhaps people that are maybe tough on themselves anyway and have, you know, unreachable estimations of what they're capable of, that contributes to being unable to communicate? Because there's always the fear that, as you say, I'm not quite good enough because I expect myself to be at a particular level that I'm nowhere near right now.
I think that's a really good question. Do you know, it took me until I was 45 before I had the courage to ask a question at a conference because I felt that it would be a stupid question.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there, like right now.
So, exactly. Oh, that's very nice, Kai. Thank you very much. Yes, I think that the more wobbly we are, the more our shame can get triggered, which trips us up and gets in the way of us being able to express ourselves. And one of the things about these techniques that we teach is they give a framework. So even if you're not confident or you don't feel safe, there's a framework by which you can model. Jane, I could not do challenge. I know I found this work because I couldn't do challenge. I was terrible at it. And I couldn't do it healthily. So I did one of 2 things. I either fumed and lost my shit, or I went on mute. Those were my two options. And actually this work has taught me how to be able to stand up for myself, how to express myself, how to understand that it's only my opinion, but I have a right to express it, how to ask for my needs, you know, all the stuff that we're not taught how to do. And that's what I'm trying to get across in this course, is to give other people those skills and tools as well.
And I guess it aligns quite well with mindfulness as well, doesn't it? Being in the moment and owning your feelings and being able to express yourself positively.
Well, the other thing it aligns with is all the work that's going on at the moment about vulnerability, you know, is that actually, you know, do you know, one of the things I say about male jails is that everybody's most scared of this V, the V for violence. Do you know what I think is the really scary thing in male jails? The V for vulnerability. People are terrified of being vulnerable, far more scared of vulnerability than they are of violence. And actually, if we can encourage a culture where people feel safe to express themselves and let their vulnerability shine through, we will create much safer communities, much safer communities, because I've witnessed it in prisons. There are the two most restorative places I've been in the UK. One's a primary school in inner city Manchester, and one's a prison in the east of England. So if they can do them in those places, you can do it anywhere.
Yeah, true.
And part of it is because people feel safe to express themselves. Or actually, all of it. People feel safe to express themselves, and they don't feel they're going to be mocked or shamed or embarrassed. I think it's a really interesting thing, this whole business about shame.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Has anybody else got any questions just before we wind up? Victoria, was that helpful to you? Good. And who else did we have on? Have we still got Rebecca? Is Rebecca still on?
Joanne is just...
Restorative philosophy and organises mediation between young offenders and victims. Always a pleasure to meet people who share our ways of thinking. Thank you. That's lovely. Thank you so much, Joanne. That's lovely. I mean, I feel that the other thing I feel about this work is that it is the way forward, because people are realising that the old command and control way didn't work. And that what then happened is people flipped and went the other way and went very, very strokey. And that's not working either. And what we need to do is we need to create high expectation and high support cultures, so that there's high accountability and high support, so that you can create a sense of agency. People have a sense of personal agency. Oh, thank you, Molly. That's really nice. Lovely. Good. Well, I'm very pleased that that was of interest to some of you. And anybody got any questions? I'll just put my email in the chat. And you're always, Jane will tell you, you're always welcome to get in touch with me. And I do always respond. You're absolutely welcome. And I'm always open to talking about this stuff because I'm boringly passionate about it.
But it's always really interesting to hear.
Good.
It's never boring. It's never boring. All the training that I've ever done with you has always been really good. It's always the best. So
thank you. Lovely. Good.